1271st day of the war. Post-censorial discussions continue. The conditions of Putin's plan are published. There is not only the exit of Ukraine from the Donetsk region, but also the confirmation of the Crimean Russian won by canceling sanctions, as well as the official status of the Russian language in Ukraine. Trump will discuss this plan with the Europeans and the Zelenskyy personally in Washington on Monday. At the same time, the information is confirmed that Putin is not pleased with Trump, as the last meeting in Alaska. It was quite obvious, but for some reason many omit this moment in the discussion of what happened. At the same time, Trump wants to organize the meeting into three as soon as possible. That is, he, Vladimir Putin, and Vladimir Zelenskyy. Trump is ready to do this already on August 22. Europeans released a joint statement in which they drew their vision of the situation and the red line, making sure that they will continue to support Ukraine and the pressure on Russia. We will talk about how the picture is drawn along the entire contract track in a minute. The Ukrainian armed forces continue to eliminate the Russian breakthroughs in the Donetsk region. More and more frames are published of the destruction and capture of the captivity of Russian soldiers who took part in all this. And the failure of the Russian army actions is recorded not only by analysts, but also by Z channels. Also, Russia tried to pass columns in the Kupiansk direction. The vehicle was destroyed even before the combat contact line came close. In Sumy, the Ukrainian armed forces continue to counterattack and have advanced 1.5 to 2 kilometers deep into Russian positions. In the Tyumen region, the nurse who remained in the military was condemned to a real term. She and her friend complained about the terrible attitude of the Russian fighters' side, their unpaid wage, and fighting. This is the first real term for a woman for desertion. This and much more in the fresh report, which you can support with your like, comments, and subscription to the channel. All these actions help promote the video. Your subscriptions are especially important for YouTube algorithms. Well, you can support the channel financially on Patreon, the link to which is in the description, and by buying NVPN. This is a tool to bypass blocking, which allows you to bypass blocking, watch YouTube at normal speed, use Twitter, Instagram, wanted blocked media, call on Telegram and WhatsApp, which was blocked by Roskomnadzor. In general, it is normal to use the internet. You can buy NVPN by the link in the description. Buying it, you support the release of the video on this channel. Well, the purchase of VPNs and their use in Russia is still legal. If something changes, we will definitely let you know. Well, now about what happened in the past day. Yesterday, while everyone discussed their feeling from the negotiations, the Russians mostly celebrate, all the rest is mostly sad. A lot of inside came out. Let's sum up what became known in the last day. First of all, Putin's proposal is relatively supported by Trump. It looks as follows. Ukrainian forces will be withdrawing from Donetsk and Lugansk regions, but they are returning to control of Ukraine from the areas in Sumy and Kharkiv regions. The ceasefire until the full agreement is signed is not planned. The formal recognition of Russia's sovereignty over Crimea, the cancellation of at least part of the sanctions against Russia, a ban for Ukraine on entering NATO, and the official status of the Russian language in some parts of Ukraine or across all Ukraine, as well as the rights of Russia to act freely. The plan, of course, is not working. Ukraine will not recognize the Russians without combat of Donetsk region, but it will not allow Russia to interfere in its constitution, whether about the language, about Russia, about anything else. But it is important that from Putin's plan the Zaporozhye and Kherson regions disappeared, as well as any restrictions for the Ukrainian army, because without the army, Ukraine is not there. Putin's proposal has become better. This doesn't mean acceptable, it means better than ever. Apparently this is why Trump is so angry. Why is this important? I think everyone is missing one important detail. The fact is that in the past few months, two countries, Russia and the United States, have been defeated in the negotiating plan. And guess which one has not been defeated? Ukraine. Kiev is ready to make a compromise, but it has red lines, quite obvious and justified, which it is not ready to cross. At the same time, which is interesting, once again Russian red lines have turned brown. I repeat 100 times that the situation is not good, but it seems to me much better than many believe. I told you in detail yesterday that the Russians are wastefully celebrating. In fact, Trump is very pleased with Putin and the results of the meeting. If yesterday I was the one who believed so, then today Wall Street Journal connected to me with its insides. During a telephone conversation with the Europeans at about 3 a.m. CET, they wrote on Saturday that Trump told the European leaders he worked 24 hours in a row and looked tired and annoyed at Putin, said the officials who took part in the conversation. This does not mean that Trump will not pressure Zelenskyy. This means that Putin has not justified Trump's expectations once again, and when the attempt to pressure Kiev will end unsuccessful again, he is likely to switch to the Kremlin again. But we are distracted. If you are interested in my thoughts on last Alaska, look at my detailed video on this topic. Now let's go back to other information that came in these days. A careful viewer will ask me, Michael, and you said that Russia and the United States were lost. What did Trump get lost in? And this is an important question. To answer it, it is necessary to remember what the conflict of Zelenskyy and Trump in the White House was about, not because of the lack of a suit. When Zelenskyy insisted that the United States should give Ukraine guarantees for security, this was the trigger. It was then that Trump began to say that he did not have a card to set conditions and all that. Trump emphasized all this time that Ukraine will not receive any guarantees from the United States, and the economic agreement between the countries is itself a guarantee, which of course is nonsense. Moreover, when European leaders approached Trump with a request to support the coalition of wishing, Trump always responded with refusal. And that was the main problem, because without help from the United States, European countries that participate in the coalition of wishing won't be able to conduct a peacekeeping mission in Ukraine. Well, because the US should provide intelligence and much more. But now the situation has changed, and the US president is ready to give Ukraine security guarantees, at least if you believe the inside. And this is what almost all Western media write. I was most surprised by the form because the option is being considered, which was proposed by the Prime Minister of Italy many months ago. Remember, she suggested creating an analysis of Article 5 of the NATO Act, but separately for Ukraine and without NATO. And the media write that it is this option that Trump began to suggest to the European leaders. In the statement of the head of the European countries, it is also reflected that Trump's position on security guarantees has changed. The former part, what is called, is finished. Now let's go to the old one. Putin's plan for Trump is not what he liked, but it turned out to be quite a real opportunity to end the war. Here he will have to do some self-citing again, since this is an important moment. Trump is not worried about what Donetsk region is, where Ukraine is, and what is happening on the front line. He just wants the problem to be solved. Moreover, he would like it, for example, if Putin captured Kiev, but this does not happen. Therefore, when he sees that something is different from Russia's initial maximalist demands, he considers it a great deal, because he doesn't care what kind of deal it will be, he just wants it to end. And not because he cares about the people in Ukraine or the people dying in this war. He cares about his image. He cares that he promised to end the war in a day, he promised that it would end in 100 days, but all this did not happen. The Nobel Peace Prize, which he so hopes, still makes it too far away from him. And it is completely obvious that Putin's option now is Trump will try to push Zelenskyy in Europe. Moreover, he warns that the three-way summit Zelenskyy-Putin-Trump can be held on August 22. Trump doesn't really like Putin's plan. He, as I said, doesn't care at all. He just wants the problem to be solved and to see this opportunity. In the coming days, he will have consultations with different people. On Monday, he plans to meet with Zelenskyy and the Western leaders who will join the meeting. The main question is whether they will be able to explain in a clear language why this deal will not be in this form. And you know, here is an important moment. Why Trump, disappointed by Putin and the meeting in Alaska, still continues to lobby Putin's plan. Because it seems to him that he will not be able to pressure Putin into something else. And therefore, the task is not to convince Trump that the deal is bad, as I see it. The task is to convince Trump that the deal will not be, that Ukraine will not go into it. Considering the meeting that will take place on Monday, in my opinion, with the country of Ukraine and its Western partners, there are two tasks. The first is to convince Putin that it is possible to fool him, and in fact, this is true. We see that Putin is already fooling around. We see that the situation in the Russian economy is rapidly deteriorating, which is recognized by Russian analysts inside Russia and Z channels and official people of the KGB headquarters. Let's take anyone. Remember the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. If you believe that the position of Russian officials has changed, then yes, but in the worst direction. Because again, the data published on the budget, which were published in August on the budget deficit, are worse than expected. More precisely, such as were expected by those who said that it would be bad, and worse than were expected by those who said that it would be normal. Putin recently held even a meeting with economists. So much of the situation apparently is clear to him that it is not in order, that there are some problems. He, of course, said that everything is good and everything is wonderful, but it does not matter. The very fact of the meeting in this case is more important. Therefore, yes, you can pressure Putin. He, first of all, showed that he was ready to retreat from his some demands, and secondly, the objective situation for Russia is becoming worse and worse, despite the serious successes on the front line, as it was not. And secondly, which should be convinced of Trump's European delegation is that Ukraine will definitely not accept these conditions, not under any conditions, not with the exception of Starlink, not with the exception of intelligence, not with the exception of helping, well, that is not help, but a deal on which Europeans can buy American weapons for Ukraine. That is, conditionally speaking, why is Trump ready to lobby Putin's ideas? Because Trump believes that Putin, what is called F***CKS now at the moment of time, and it is kind of more difficult for him to get through. The conditional goal of Ukraine and the European delegation is to show that they are also F***CKed together, and it is impossible to break through them. That is, this is, it seems to me, two main goals with which this meeting will be held on Monday. Thank God people who Trump ponies will join. They talk about the fact that Stubb will be there. They talk about the fact that Melanie can appear there. I would, to be honest, say that Macron can be, but it seems to me that Macron's participation in all this movement is not very good now. First of all, because he talks a lot and does not do anything. And secondly, because he is very angry with the Americans for the pseudo-recognition of Palestine. Well, why a pseudo-recognition? Because it was a recognition on Twitter here and without some kind of legal actual designation. But in fact, Marco Rubio and many other American representatives said that this is not a very good story at all. Because it gave commas confidence in the background of what is happening, and instead of forcing commas to capitulate, and so that the terrorist organization commas stopped controlling with gas, instead of which Macron actually threw a bone at them, forcing them to be sure that they can achieve their own. That's why it seems to me that it is not necessary for Macron to be there, but for me to decide. This is just my opinion of the situation. All this, of course, can end in a scandal, but I think that in the long run, in any case, Trump will again return to the position of need for pressure on Russia, although there will be no pressure. But these are already my guessings of the details about which I told in yesterday's video. On the interesting ones, I will give you the opinion of some Z channels, which did not give way to a general feast and joy in the city of Russian propaganda after the summit in Alaska. For example, here is the post from the Z channel Russian Idea, which is reposted by the infamous Z-man Alexei Zhivov. Well, what can be said, they write. Apparently, Trump will still give something to the Europeans. I think it's about the same conditions that were introduced in June 2024. Like, these are the last conditions of Russia, there is no other option to stop the war. Trump said that there is no deal, no one was waiting for a deal, they were actually waiting for a deal, they were actually waiting for a deal. But apparently there is no general understanding here. Trump suddenly began to boast of his own team. This is not a very good sign. In fact, it means the guys are good, they did everything they could. Trump, of course, sympathizes with Putin, wants to friend him very much, but he can't start over Ukraine, not by personal, but by political reasons. On his face was certainty. He describes how Trump said at the Putin press conference, I take the words in quotation marks because it was not a press conference, they just went out, said a couple of words and left, not allowing the journalists to ask any questions. But I agree with this assessment. If you saw Trump's face, Putin shined from happiness, Trump is not at all. The committed person continues the Z channel, which is forced to enter the fight which he wants but cannot avoid, what is called words to the god of ears. Here's the worry of one of the largest Z war corps, Semyon Pegov. Obviously, he writes the negotiations will continue. Another question is whether the massive strikes on Ukraine will continue. It should be noted that their activity before the meeting with our country significantly decreased. This is, by the way, true. From the side of Ukraine, the intensity of the strike has significantly increased. Drone strikes on oil refineries in different regions and defense enterprises have been reported. Ukrainian UAVs have been looting Belgorod and Donetsk. On the last day, they were hit by American HIMARS, by the way, which, it must be said, has not happened for a long time. In Sumy, the Ukrainian regime tried to organize a provocation. There were statements about shelling of the central market with signed victims among the civilians. Even the video appeared as some kind of fire. But the Russian Ministry of Defense warned about something like this. Apparently, something will remove the fewest. Putin again called the Ukrainian people brotherly at the press conference. It didn't work out and everything is dead, he ironicizes. What will happen next, he is afraid. If our strikes on the objects of the Ukrainian regime resume, then for Trump there will be a reason to say again that Putin is doing a lot of nonsense and imposing sanctions to break the initial negotiating process. On the other hand, what about Russia? Because of the endless talks to stop the SVO, the Z channel is asked. And this is actually a pretty interesting thought, because really, before this summit, Russian strikes decreased significantly. They didn't stop at all. Russia didn't stop the terror, but it was very significant. For example, the strikes before that were 300, 400, 500 shots for one attack in one day, and now there are 70, 80, 90. That's still a lot. They still kill civilians, but significantly less. Why did this happen? Because Trump has repeatedly emphasized that Russia's strikes on Ukraine are its main trigger. He's repeatedly emphasized that many times. And now in this situation, on one hand, Putin kind of wants to keep striking. Because the war is coming, it scares the Ukrainian population. That's one of Russia's tactics to force their capitulation and so on. On the other hand, he knows that this is a big trigger for Trump. And Trump, with his relative concern and readiness to negotiate with Russia, has kind of put Putin in a position where he can't allow himself to continue such a massive attack. Well, he can allow himself, but this will lead to many efforts to return Trump to the point from which he left, where he said that we were talking to Putin. Then I put the call, I told my wife what a good conversation we had means, and then the missiles and drones are flying through Ukraine, and she tells me about this here, so this is really a problem for Vladimir Putin, and it's good that he has it. Though as you can see, there are those who are not participating in the general festive Russian cheer, pointing out that the white gentleman hit Putin. And the last thing it makes sense to mention in this context is that this is an absolutely coincidental, in quotation marks, slip of documents about the formal part of the meeting with Putin. Of course, I don't believe in such coincidences, especially when, so to speak, the American service, well, the FSO channel, what is it called? Oh God, I forget, sorry, the Secret Service, I think when they clean up all posts like this and all this is connected, I don't believe in coincidences. The slip looks absolutely controllable to me. I will explain why it was needed later. To start with what happened, Trump's command forgets in the printer of one of the hotels in Alaska documents about the Trump and Putin summit. The program was lunch in honor of his superiority. Putin, as it is written, and a gift to the Arlana status. In Anchorage, one of the hotel guests photographed documents from the Trump and Putin summit program, leaving them in the printer, apparently, with the help of U.S. administration. The photo of these documents later turned out to be in the control of the NPR, which confirmed their neutrality. According to the documents, a formal dinner was planned after the talks in honor of his superiority, Vladimir Putin. In addition, Trump was to give the Russian dictator a symbolical gift, the Arlana status of the national bird of the United States of America. It seems to me that the line is absolutely controllable. To demonstrate, yes, the dinner was planned, as well as the next meeting in the wide format and also with a gift, but this did not happen. Apparently, it is the American side that Donald Trump specifically mentioned. He canceled ceremonial things, the most important element of the American culture of negotiations. However, this is what I talked about yesterday. Just now there are documents that do not leave space for bluff. But how they appeared, in my opinion, is an attempt to make an accent on this part for those who did not notice or made the view that they did not notice. Well, write in the comments how much conspirological thinking is getting worse for you, or it really seems strange to you, suddenly forgotten documents. As you know, sometimes the iPhone prototype is suddenly forgotten, and so on. Here, but completely exactly, we can claim that, lowering all the words connected with the Trump said, with the Putin said, and with everyone else, despite the action, that the lunch was cancelled and the ceremonial gift was cancelled, which was to say about the closeness and openness to future interaction. There was no such thing as in the second part of the negotiations, for which, in fact, the Belousov, Seluanov, Ludovic Besant from the American side, and so on, flew there. In my opinion, this is much more important than what was there at the press conference and who said it. But the Americans are not a reliable partner, as with Trump for sure, as in principle, Ukraine has one reliable partner, this is its own army. Therefore, we continue to help the Ukrainian army, especially in this difficult time. Vladimir Putin and the Russian army now, at the moment of all these continuing negotiations, will make the most effort to achieve some success on the battlefield. We saw how they tried to organize a breakthrough in the Pokrovsk direction, and we will talk about this again. But in any case, the pressure will only increase. This is what Zelenskyy says after the Siersky report, that now, in the background of the talks, Russia will strengthen its offensive in order to demonstrate its opportunity to capture territory. That's why support for Ukrainian soldiers right now is incredibly important. And today we are gathered together for GARUDA, which is fighting just in this very Donetsk direction, in the Donetsk region, in one of the most difficult directions of this war. Here is their message to you. I wish you health. We are GARUDA unit. We ask for support, help from subscriptions to the Telegram and YouTube channel Michael Nacke. We work in Donbass. We destroy the enemy. With your help, we will destroy even more. Thank you. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine. In the description, the link to the Monobank, the QR code to the Monobank is here. Also in the description is PayPal and SDT TRC20, that is, cryptocurrencies in fact, with the help of which you can donate with cryptocurrency. Thank you very much to everyone who supports these fundraisings. Thank you very much to everyone who supports the Ukrainian army. Thank you very much for the Ukrainian military. You literally save the lives of people in this way and help Ukraine fight Russian aggression. I will tell you separately about the European reaction. Friedrich Merz on the day published his statement. President Macron, Prime Minister Meloni, Prime Minister Starmer, President Stubb, Prime Minister Tusk, President of the European Commission Kostya Council, President of the European Commission von der Leyen. Earlier in the morning, President Trump wrote in the statement, informed us and President Zelenskyy about the results of his meeting with the President of Russia in Alaska on August 15, 2025. The leaders welcomed the efforts of President Trump aimed at stopping the killings in Ukraine, ending the Russian war, aggression, and achieving a fair and long world. As President Trump noted, there is no agreement until it is concluded. According to the plan of President Trump, the next steps will be further negotiations with the participative President Zelenskyy, who he will soon meet. We are also ready to work with President Trump and President Zelenskyy to hold a three-way summit in support of Europe. We clearly claim that Ukraine must have contact guarantee security for effective protection of its sovereignty and territorial integrity. We welcome President Trump's statement about U.S. readiness to provide security guarantees. The list of those who want is ready to play an active role. There should be no restrictions for the armed forces of Ukraine or its cooperation with the third countries. Russia cannot have the right to veto on the path of Ukraine to the EU and NATO. The decision on the territory of Ukraine will be made only by Ukraine. The international border cannot be changed by forces. Our support for Ukraine will continue. We are determined to do more to strengthen Ukraine to achieve the ceasefire of the just and long-term world. While killings in Ukraine continue, we are ready to support the pressure on Russia. We will continue to strengthen sanctions and wider economic measures to pressure the Russian military economy until the achieving of the just and long-term world. Ukraine can count on our unwavering solidarity while we will work against the world that will protect the vital interests of the security of Ukraine and Europe. It is said in this statement in absolutely the right way and in content. Ukraine continues to fight on the Russian railway network to limit Russian military logistics. The federal passenger company confirmed the attack on the Litsk railway station in the Voronezh region. 14 trains are delayed. The railway station was attacked by the UAV of the Voronezh region. The LEP is damaged and several trains are delayed, said the governor. Residents report the defeat of the Litsk railway station. There are photos and videos. Well, the governor, the same, says that these are all breakdowns of UAVs. Well, how else could these breakdowns be? Successes of Ukraine in the elimination of the Russian breakthrough are recognized by more and more analysts, including Clement Malin, who's one of the first to write about the Russian breakthrough. Here's his thread. After the arrival of the reinforcements and the delay of the Russian breakthrough, Ukrainian troops counterattacked and managed to throw the Russians away. Ukraine has returned control over the new line of Donbass. This is no longer a secret. The Ukrainian troops began a counterattack 2 days ago. Yesterday morning, they returned control over the Golden Well and threw the Russians behind the line of New Donbass, wrote Clement Malin yesterday. In the video published by the Ukrainian 93rd Mechanized Brigade, it is seen how it enters into battle with the Russian soldiers of the 132nd Brigade in Veseloy, about 12 kilometers from the previously known line of the front. During the operation, they captured several Russian soldiers and attacked them with the help of unmanned ground transport resources. In the center of the breakthrough, some Russian soldiers can still be in the trap. They will probably sit in the fortifications and wait for reinforcements, and the UAVs will supply them. However, one of the most important achievements is the liberation of Nikanorovka and Dorozhnaya. Dobropolye is again in security, he writes, and the destruction of Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups to the north of Pokrovskoe, especially between Rodinsk and Belitsk. Was the situation ever so catastrophic? Clement Malin asks, yes, Russian units broke through the front line and advanced about 15 kilometers, overcoming all the main obstacles on foot. They managed to temporarily cut the Dobropolye-Kramatorsk road, creating a threat to the entire central section of the front in Donetsk region. We can note a very quick and good reaction from the Ukrainian leadership. Usysk has assault groups. Instead of attacking Tekhanovka in the Kursk region, they are better used to contain advance of the Russian troops and push them back when possible, writes Clement Malin. Deep State also tells about the purge and the breakthrough. In the stabilization of the situation, active participation was made by the fighters of the 93rd MBR, which showed frames of the purge of the Vizly settlement. A purge was carried out in the Vizly village, as well as the enemy managed to partially penetrate into Grusko, but they did not spend long there. The fighters of the brigade also managed to capture many Russians in captivity. The retreat was carried out by a company of scouts, cold-in fighters, an unmanned system of different types, and artillery. In addition, when the Ukrainian territory was liberated, strike ground robotic systems, robots armed with machine guns, and fire on the enemy's meeting, coming in fact close, Deep State writes, which I told you about yesterday. Z-channels complain that this breakthrough has not ended with anything. Here is what Maxim Kalashnikov writes. The breakthrough in the north of Pokrovsk begins to be eliminated, and the reasons were written earlier. In general, they did not go to the rear of Slavyansk, they did not take any cover from the boiler, but professional generals, he ironicizes. In general, many Z-channels write about this, but maybe we will collect it separately with you. Also, Deep State again raises the problem of flag pickers and their influence on the assessment of the situation with control over certain settlements. As a flag picker, they write, it kills us in. The case Medods and Skroy have already written many times that the Russians are holding propaganda actions with the raising of flags for the promise of a paid vacation. Accordingly, these actions are one way in the vast majority. Another case from the settlement of Andriy-Fikliv-Sivo, the old name of Iskra, where the Kaspi made a couple of flag picking on the camera, and the Russian Ministry of Defense announced control over the village. Foreign and some of our analysts ran to bring the village to occupation, but our sources in the brigade immediately reported that the Russians who did this killed or captured. Today, confirmation of this came out of the GOR. Now all analysts have run to free the village, but it has not even been occupied. About in the last week at Andriy-Fikliv-Sivo, at least 50 Russians were eliminated, at least 10 were captured. Accordingly, the tactical situation in the village does not change, except for the penetration of flag picker groups who come through the green guy. Deep State notes once again emphasizes that it is not necessary to focus on the flag picker. And of course, we observe this in the Asin community, that indeed the flag picker is no longer a proof that a certain settlement is captured, liberated, and so on. On the North Slobozhansk direction, the Ukrainian troops have advanced by 1 or 2.5 kilometers, the Ukrainian General Staff reports. It is about the Sumy region, as Major Andriy Kovalov said. Ukrainian armed forces are doing active actions, in particular in the Alexeyevka and Unikovka areas, holding the fire control zone to deprive Russian occupiers of the opportunity to supply, evacuate, and reinforce. So you know, these stories that Vladimir Putin will leave the Sumy region. What are they doing there in the Sumy region? Well, that is, all their pathos, all their advance, they are kind of no longer relevant at all. Also, as the trip to Kharkiv, which, remember, was also, they passed 5-10 kilometers there, then they stopped them, and then they began to knock them out. Well, the same thing is happening in the Sumy region. Even better, because if on Kharkiv line is more or less on the approach to Kharkiv, well, the approach in quotation marks, because there is far before Kharkiv, there just everything is there in Volchansk, then there is no such thing here, but that is, the Russians are just completely knocking it out. Again, let it not sound simple, it is very difficult, and heroic Ukrainian soldiers deal with it, but they deal with it. Therefore, all this, of course, but again Putin just pissed Trump off. Do you remember when Trump told how in the Kursk region there are around 2,500 Ukrainian troops? This is all so much beep, it's so untruthful, it's so much. I have an allergy for lies, I just hate it, it throws me into some aggression, into anger when this happens, but the special officer in the unit is normal. The 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade Magar together with the adjacent unit destroyed a Russian truck with a clip cannon during the crossing through the river Sem in the Kursk region. The video of the defeat was published by the press service of the 47th Brigade. Judging by the video, the Russian truck was destroyed when it tried to change through the flooded pontoon bridge, which however, due to a small depth, simply lay on the bottom of the river, forming a kind of bream. During the crossing, the reconnaissance company MBR Magura, with the help of the reconnaissance drone Shark, found the goal and gave the targets for the friendly unit, which destroyed it with the help of UAV kamikaze of the airplane type. Immediately after the hit of the UAVs in the caravan, a detonation of the set occurred, which destroyed it, and the centers of the archive community determined that the event occurred near the village of Zivana in the Kursk region, according to their analysis. Truck Ural 4320 was destroyed, on which was probably a Cannon 100B. The bridges through the SSE River were destroyed by the Ukrainian Defense Forces during the offensive in the Kursk region in August 2024. So since then, for crossing through the river in this area, the Russians are forced to introduce also a regularly striking pontoon. But what is important in this video, and what we know from this situation, is that Ukraine continues to have fire control over Russia's logistics routes of the supply line to the Sumy region. Divisions of the 10th Army Corps, along with the previous units, reflected the first Russian mechanized assault on the Kupiansk direction in a long time. This was reported by the press service of the 10th Army Corps and Major Yuri Fedorenko, commander of the 429th Separate Regiment of Unmanned Systems, HILS. After the successful negotiations, in quotation marks, in Alaska, the Russians believed in themselves, and for the first time in a long time run to a mechanized assault with the use of armored vehicles on the Kupiansk direction, Fedorenko said. It is noted that the enemy decided to make a throw on the left bank of the city of Kupiansk. For this, a mechanized assault group consisted of 2 tanks, 3 motorized vehicles, and about 40 people of the enemy's personnel. Thanks to the coordinated and timely actions of the 429th Separate Regiment of Unmanned Systems HILS, the 116th Separate Mechanized Brigade, and the 15th Brigade of Operation Karadak, the encirclement was stopped. All 5 unified armored vehicles were destroyed. In particular, 1 tank and 2 motorized vehicles were destroyed by the forces of the 429th Regiment. Another motorized vehicle was damaged. Asinter Moklason and the social network Twitter, based on the published videos, determined that the armored group was broken in the vicinity of the village of Liman 1, not even reaching the front line. Researcher Tatarigami analyzed the losses of the 8th Combined Arms Army of the Russian Armed Forces according to reports about the missing people. In the past 1.5 years, from January 2024 to June 2025, the losses of the missing people were 6,921 soldiers and officers, while the number of such cases sharply increases in 2025, almost double the comparison with last year. The largest losses among the Army units were suffered by the 102nd Motorized Rifle Regiment. The number of missing people in this regiment is 1,858 people, which almost 3 times surpasses the average level by other units of the 8th Army. At the same time, the number of the Russian Motorized Rifle Regiment usually makes up about 2,000 people, which is just a little more than the number of missing people. Comparing the numbers of killed and wounded, it can be assumed that the regiment has completely replenished its composition at least 3 times, and this has only been a year and a half. At the same time, some of the regiment's losses of about 4.5% are foreign citizens. According to the calculations of Tatarigami, about 7% of these foreigners are Chinese, although the civilization does not be specified clearly. However, in the messages about the failure of the army, fantastic Chinese names appear. Again, we are not looking at absolute values here, but at the dynamics. And the dynamics is obvious. Russia's losses are increasing and increasing significantly. The first woman in the Stabilization region was prosecuted for desertion until the real time. This is a quite wild story, so I will tell it completely. And it seems to me very indicative, because usually when we talk about the Russian army, we talk about men, we talk about assaults, we talk about contractors, we talk about how contracts are forced and all that. But there are also women who go to the Russian army, including the sisters. If you think that their conditions are much better, this is not so. They also become slaves. They also cannot leave these contracts. And they meet many of what is meeting among the men. And some women are really already sent to the assault. Mostly, I understand, women from the colony, while others just tired of abuse from men, so to speak. Comrade men, servicemen, tired of low payments, which they pay. Although they promised much more, try to leave the Russian army, but in the end, they sit in prison. 37-year-old sister Anna, 5 years and 6 months, will spend in the colony. Her friend Olsia is still waiting for court. The girl is accused of a similar article. According to the army's version of 2 men, they were mocked at the bottom. The servicemen were offended, the lieutenant broke his hand, and the leadership didn't pay the proper pay. Now she's trying to prove to the court that her words are true. That is, 2 girls appear in us, one has already gone to prison and the other wants to be jailed. The story will be just from the face of the second girl. They are friends. 4 years before the SVO, Olsia worked as a nurse in Patriot Shivo, then resigned and for 3 months transferred to the COVID center, reports the publication 72 Ru, which tells this story. First in 2 men, then in the north, so she worked for more than a year. At the SVO, Olsia decided to go because she wanted to somehow show herself so that her mother would be proud. A girl with tears reminds her eldest brother. He died after participating in the combat actions in Chechnya. The family has photos of a young boy in the room. After the death of his son, her mother had serious problems with her mental health, so Olsia should be with her for periods. Concerned about her mother's health, there's a report by the publication that reports this. They indicate that the woman is under surveillance of a special agency. At the SVO, Olsia went with her friend Anna. The girl says that in the Timensk military commissariat, they promised to pay about 200,000 every month. She saw this amount on the posters in the city. Contract was for 1 year. She was to return exactly a year later to be next to her mother, Olsia clarifies. We didn't expect any kind of resort, we had a desire to help. The friend's contract was signed in the Nizhny Novgorod region in the village of Mulino in the middle of October 2022. Olsia became a F-eater, a medical sister as an anesthetist in a separate medical battalion of the tank division. From Mulino, Olsia and Anna were sent to the Valya in the Belgorod region, where they turned a tent town into. They worked in a surgery department where we made shackles, she clarifies. This is an operational one in the field zone. We worked honestly day after day, made shackles with torn tips and did not miss a single shift, says Olsia. According to the document that Olsia provided, the pay varied from 30 to 100,000 rubles. For example, in April 2023, the nurse got 38,584 rubles. In June, 41,956 rubles. In July, 54,903 rubles. In addition, Olsia was paid the appropriate federal 195,000 rubles. The problems with the payments began several months after the start of the service, says Olsia. According to her, they did not pay for the field conditions, compensation for every appropriate additional day for the whole year, for the trip to the service site by train, and for 2 months of service. With questions about the pay, the girls turned to the major. We just asked a question, why do we have such a pay? When we worked in 2 men, we received more. The major said, girls, stop crying. What kind of earned pay of 200,000? We haven't talked about 200,000 before, but we got 38,500 rubles. He said, thank you for saying we pay you here at all. Don't anger at me. In fact, I want it to be easier for you to serve with us men. You have to be friends, then the service will go easier. I said I didn't come here to be friends. He just laughed at us. Alesha says, Alesha clarified from this moment that her relationship with the major and several other men close to his environment were destroyed. According to her, he could insult a friend and make fun of her. Alesha refers to an example of this story, when a comrade allegedly forbade her to sit at a table during lunchtime. Or, according to the girl, the man got drunk, said he was actually trying to like her and would like to have his first and last meeting. Alesha recalls a situation, when the comrade allegedly forced her to wear size 45 heels when she had the chance to wash and turned off the hot water. It was impossible to pass through there, the major constantly holded us. I called my girlfriend Timin and Pumba, there were often ugly squabble, Alesha adds. Some girls who friendly with payment were different. They became sergeants and lieutenants. In Valika, the sisters were until April 6, 1923. Then the girls went on vacation. They asked to be transferred to another unit because they were tired of having different relations with men. Alesha said they were refused, and so they went back to the old unit. From Dzerzhinsk on May 16, the girls needed to go back to Volodika. For this, the doctors formed a military transfer document. One ticket showed a mistake, which the girls reported to the major responsible for. At first, according to Alesha, no print was pasted there, and then no lines were filled. Called the mayor to tell him about it. In the video, which the girls recorded, the supposedly serviceman shouts at the document an insult. The documents and recordings confirming Alesha's words are in the direction of redaction 72, RU. Then her friend called her comrade, who also controlled the issue at the Ministry of Defense. She said the one who wrote the complaint wrongly was to blame. The source says the major yelled at another girl, and in the army the problem is only one, men don't accept it. The result, Alesha claims, and the girls had to pay for the trip themselves. After a while, Alesha and her friend arrived at the Special Military Operations Zone of the LPR as part of the Moving Medical Group. The service there began in early August 2023, close to the end of the contract. At the beginning of October 2023, her friend was sent to Milan. There they waited for documents to be distributed. Alesha was to continue her service in Kaliningrad, her friend in St. Petersburg. The story that occurred on October 18, 2023, Alesha tells in detail. On that day, she recalls a girl who returned with San and another colleague. The soldier was at the front, and Alesha says, "I didn't understand who he was, I only saw him open and close the door." A young man, according to the girl, demanded only her bags be opened and claimed there could be alcohol inside. The girl and her colleague confidently passed by. "I didn't have anything forbidden, I just didn't have anything to do with it, but she didn't open the bag. Before that, for example, that soldier didn't give me a full teapot. He didn't treat me as a colleague or serviceman," Olsia reminds me. At some point, they began talking at half a ton higher. He started provoking me. Again, he talked about the situation with the bag, the teapot. At that moment, a lieutenant ran out of the room, says Olsia. He heard the conversation between her and the soldiers. He just flew out and started insulting me. "Yes, go to hell," and then mother. I was just shocked because when we were in the hospital, I was under his control. We worked without conflicts, calmly. "What's the answer? Why are you talking to me like that?" He started insulting again, saying that he was too proud. I started insulting him in response too, because he covered me with mud. According to Olsia, the lieutenant waved and hit her on the face. At that time, Anna was in the room. The colleague was standing behind the door. The strike was so big that I fell on the floor. The lieutenant started shouting, "Come out, look." She fell by herself, and I didn't touch her. I fell on the hand. I had a break in the ulna, a break in the groin, a break in the biceps. For that, I was raised and taken to a room. The ulna was in the other direction. They looked at the hand, pulled it, and the bone became in place. After that, Olsia turned to the battalion commander. They told her they'd be sent to the clinic the next day. The arm got sicker, and Olsia went to the military hospital herself. He gave her a diagnosis of a break in the groin and a break in the groin. According to the girl, the battalion commander asked not to talk about the fact that the lieutenant hit her, and she agreed at first. After that, they sent me on a medical vacation to my girlfriend too, because she also fell at the special military operation. We came home together. Anna and Olsia left on a vacation on October 24. They had the corresponding legality of being at home. In part, Olsia went on the 30th of January of 1924, where she was given a personal case. According to Olsia, she was to arrive at a new service site at the end of February 1924. In Moline, Olsia went to the prosecutor's office and told them about what was happening in the army, about the break, the pay, and the attitude of the servicemen. I told the prosecutor about the break. He said, "Olsia, everyone's gone now. When I came to the unit, everyone said you had fallen yourself." But the prosecutor didn't come to me. He explained that it made sense to start a criminal case and that his girlfriend couldn't be a witness because she's interested, Olsia says. The prosecutor said, "Come to the hospital on vacation, the unit won't start a criminal case on you. As for the pay, I'll figure it out." Olsia didn't go to the main office on that day. She admits she couldn't handle the situation, so she got afraid of the leadership. Also, her mother started getting sick in the spring. She's the only one who can take care of her. "We didn't refuse to work, we just got scared. This unjustification has stopped. We didn't hide from anyone, we were in touch all this time. Now we're defenders of the homeland," says Olsia. "What are my plans? My girlfriend is in prison now. I'm Annette who, according to her, broke her hand. The doctor's sister has already been officially accused of abandoning the unit for over 1 month. Judges are suspended because Olsia can't be present at meetings. She got leg injury in Tumen and is now going to rehab. Doctors gave her a diagnosis of shrapnel in the crutches and other injuries. She's now undergoing treatment for her account and waiting for surgery." For several months, the girl applied to the prosecutor's office, to the president of the Russian Investigative Committee, to the governor of Rutman's region, to the People's Front, to the defenders of the homeland with a request to pay attention to her story. This did not bring the results. According to the versions of military investigators, the refutations of Olsia for not paying payments fully confirmed the money pressure and confirmed the corresponding position and rank. As for the lieutenant, the criminal case was refused in connection with the lack of a crime composition according to articles of exceeding the official powers and insulting serviceman. Olsia says that her girlfriend, who was in one room during the conflict, was never asked for help. Only on May 29, 1925, did Olsia receive documents from the Military Investigation Department on the Smolensk garrison. It was reported that the case of exceeding the official powers of the lieutenants will be respected. The lie of the commander of the military unit in the serviceman's characteristics wrote that Olsia does not treat the task conscience-wise, the orders of the commanders to perform are reluctant, the communication with the commanders shows disrespect. According to the lieutenant's description, Olsia is conflicted, unequal, and ignoble. He clarified in his conclusion, based on material from the serviceman's office, that Olsia left her service voluntarily because of indisciplinarity, sense of optimism, and indecency. Investigators counted that Olsia left her service voluntarily from February 8, 2023 to July 8, 2024. In the summer, she voluntarily came to the investigative committee under the Kupiansk garrison and stated that she was hidden from service due to her desire. So a defender advised her to make a deal, which the girl then coordinated, she said. Close Annas who are already sitting say that she also complained about humiliation. Allegedly, men could call a girlfriend a woman of light behavior, and when they arrived home, she told this to her family. The name was changed because Close Annas said that she did not want public attention. Annas had a state lawyer who, according to relatives, advised her not to be afraid and to go to court. In April, the woman came to another meeting and did not return home. Researchers established it. Anna was supposed to come to the unit on February 9, 1924. In July, the woman came to the Timensk investigators themselves and said that she had not come to the place of service. She explained to the security forces that the first months after the contract was concluded, they did not pay the wage completely, and she was afraid to return to the unit for leadership, but the court read these proofs to be objective. Anna was sentenced to 5 years and 6 months in a general mess colony for more than 1 month. Her relatives filed an appeal and want to change the criminal law into a conditional one. They wrote an appeal to Putin with the request to pay attention to the situation. It seems to me that the story is quite wild but clear, and I'm telling it exactly for that. Don't think that there are any relations with the Russian army that will allow you, I don't know, to receive money and not be at the risk of criminal charges, at the risk of drone flight, and so on. It's a grave, a Russian army, a fascist occupation army, no matter how you treat it, it's a grave for you. They'll humiliate you there, insult you there, they won't pay you the pay, and in the end they'll prison you if you want to stop all of this, if they don't kill you. This happens too. So clip your ears and stop your family and loved ones, including women, from joining the Russian army in any way possible. And finally, about the new elite. A Russian serviceman who returned from the war wounded raped a resident of a village in the Perm territory. Till death do us, the victims of the case of Beep held earlier by the condemned serviceman Yuri Nemtin, said Astra, the local residents. In relation to the man, they initiated a criminal case of Beep, Astra found out. The resident of the village accused Yuri that during the joint drinking of alcohol one day, he hid it on the floor and raped. How Astra identified it by looking at the databases, Nemtin was previously condemned multiple times, including for the threat of killing, harm to health, and theft. In 2023, he recruited for the war in Ukraine, then got injured and returned home. Do not cross with Russian soldiers, they are dangerous to your health, life, and Beep contact, especially when it comes to alcohol. Michael Nacke was with you, and see you soon. All the best. Bye.